Hola, 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 y bienvenidos a otro episodio de Listen, Read, Interact. Welcome to another episode of Listen, Read, Interact. This is episode number 74. You can follow along at listenreadinteract.com/74. The number 74. My name is Andrew Snyder, and I am the host of the Listen, Read, Interact podcast. Listen, Read, Interact is a Spanish language learning podcast. And if you're new to Spanish, I don't recommend starting out with this episode. Instead, I recommend that you check out episode number 50, listenreadinteract.com/50. And that one is designed for true beginners, and there's a series of them there that is for true beginners. Today's episode is also part 2 in a 3-part series. So episode 73 was part 1, and today is part 2, and episode 75 will be part 3, the concluding portion of the series. And together, the show notes and all together, it provides a complete story from beginning to end. There's a beginning, middle, and end, and today we're going to hear the middle portion of the story. So last week, we started out, and today we have the middle, and next week we have the ending. Now, Listen, Read, Interact is a self-contained lesson in every episode. That's the idea. And so going back to the very beginning of, at the very beginning of today's episode, you'll see a pre-reading plus examples and interactions phase. And so there's going to be some vocab that's targeted. There's going to be some way to interact with that vocab and kind of work with it a little bit. There are some example sentences that are really the target of part 1. And those example sentences are great for a dictation. If you go to the show notes page, you'll find them in a blue box. They're wonderful for teachers. There's a way to go into classroom mode, show one example at a time, show them all at a time. If you click on the sentences, it'll give you the complete translation of that sentence. And so it's a great tool. And you can interact however you want to interact. On the show, you will hear those 8 example sentences. And so you can listen along, you can read along at the same time. You could try to do a dictation, as I said, where you try to write down what you hear exactly as it sounds to you. The idea really is that with these 8 sentences, you listen to them and try to understand them. Try to receive the messages that are being communicated to you. You can read them as well. Reading and listening are the 2 ways you get language in your head. And then to really build out the system inside there, you should interact with some way with that text. So like if someone asks you a question, interacting might be talking, or it might be writing down an answer, that sort of thing. It could be as simple as ticking a box, yes or no, taking a survey. That there's many, many ways to interact with the language that you hear. It doesn't always have to be speaking, although speaking can be a way to interact. Part 1 then is really based on those examples, trying to read them, understand them, hear them, understand them, and then interacting with the language in some way. Now, the language in part 1 builds to part 2, which is a short version of the middle part of our story. So last episode we had the first part of the story. This episode we have the middle part, and the brief reading part is an intermediate reading going between those example sentences. This reading here is a kind of an intermediate one that leads to the final one. Again, in part 2, there's lots of ways of interacting. I recommend reading and listening at the same time if you're in a position to do so. Obviously, not when you're driving, but listening and reading at the same time is a great way to do that. It's a great way to boost your comprehension. The reading is there, the complete reading is there, the brief reading is there on the show notes page with footnotes of likely unfamiliar vocabulary. Very useful for when you're trying to not look up words all the time, but still don't want to get stuck on something. So likely unfamiliar vocabulary is glossed for you. There's a cause and effect box where you can kind of, okay, if this is the cause, what's the effect that produces? That's a great way to interact. There's a true or false quiz for this. There's a survey, and there are some order the actions based on the story that you read. So lots of ways to interact with the text in part 2. Then our goal really is to get to this part 3. And part 3 is the complete reading And it's the whole middle part of the story from episodes 73, 74, 75. And there's a multiple choice quiz. There's a complete the sentence open-ended section where you can kind of decide how you want to complete those sentences. And then there are some open-ended questions that are maybe more personal questions for you to answer about yourself. And then a reflection where you can write a little bit more. So lots of ways to listen, lots of ways to read, and lots of ways to interact with this text. If you're a teacher, this is great to use in a classroom. I'm using it in my Spanish 2 class that I'm teaching online. And so there's lots of, it's actually used. I actually use this text, and it's a good one. So when we begin, in just a moment here, you'll hear some music, and we'll be all in Spanish. And so part 1, you'll hear those example sentences all in Spanish. They'll be repeated 3 times each, once slow, once very slow, and once again a bit faster to kind of mimic the real life speed of things, at least a bit more. Part 2 will be separated by a bell sound. So when we're done with part 1, you'll hear a bell sound, and we'll move on to part 2. And then part 3 will also be separated by a bell sound, and there'll be a brief intermission in between part 2 and part 3, and we'll get right back to the show. So that is the plan. Part 1, examples. Part 2, brief reading. And part 3, the complete reading plus interaction. Check it out. Follow along with the show notes. listenreadinteract.com/74. Ejemplos. Número 1. El profesor tiene la cabeza rasurada. El profesor tiene la cabeza rasurada. El profesor tiene la cabeza rasurada. 2. No puedo ponerle la cara al hombre en la biblioteca. No puedo ponerle la cara al hombre en la biblioteca. No puedo ponerle la cara al hombre en la biblioteca. 3. ¿Desean algo de postre? ¿Desean algo de postre? ¿Desean algo de postre? 4. Ella compra una sandía entera. Ella compra una sandía entera. Eso suena un poco brasileiro. Ella compra una sandía entera. Ella compra una sandía entera. 5. Mi primo participa en un concurso de comer hamburguesas. Mi primo participa en un concurso de comer hamburguesas. Mi primo participa en un concurso de comer hamburguesas. 6. Yo juro que estudio todos los días. Yo juro que estudio todos los días. Yo juro que estudio todos los días. 7. Ella jura que no es difícil. Ella jura que no es difícil. Ella jura que no es difícil. 8. Ellos piden una pizza entera para compartir. Ellos piden una pizza entera para compartir. Ellos piden una pizza entera para compartir. Lectura breve. Mi nombre es Estrella. Mi esposo Eduardo y yo estamos en Santiago para un concurso de comer. Al mediodía, Eduardo y yo vamos a un café-restaurante que se llama Ex Fidanzato. El lugar promociona su lasaña y su café. Entramos y nos sentamos a una mesa. Un mesero viene a nuestra mesa. Es un hombre alto. Tiene la cabeza rasurada y mucha barba. No puedo ponerle la cara, pero pienso que lo reconozco. Cuando habla, estoy segura de que conozco su voz, pero no sé de dónde. Le digo, buen día, señor. Usted me parece familiar, muy familiar. ¿Lo conozco? Él me dice que no lo cree y me pregunta si deseo algo de tomar. Le encargo un cafecito. Eduardo pide una lasaña entera porque está entrenando para su concurso de comer. El mesero se va. Yo le digo a mi esposo, yo juro que conozco a nuestro mesero, pero no puedo ponerle la cara. Ok, una pausa rapidito. Listen, Read, Interact is a value for value show. So if you're finding value in this show, all I ask in return for putting out this free content, and it's on YouTube and it's on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and on the website itself, listenreadinteract.com/74 for this particular episode. All I ask is that you send some value back this way. And you can do that in many ways. You can share the show with other people, send a link to the website, send a link to the donations page, that sort of stuff. There's many ways you can help, but probably the best way to help out is to support us financially, and that's a way to ensure that we can keep going. You can donate any amount, any frequency, like as you're listening along, and as soon as you feel like you received some value from the show, send some value back this way. And honestly, I think those show notes pages that are on the website are worth the price of admission just by themselves. There's a lot of content there, lots of things you can do. It can help support you for, part of your week if you're trying to learn Spanish. It might be your whole week if you're only doing 3 days a week. You could do part 1 one day, part 2 another day, part 3 another day, and really get all the juice out of that fruit, as it were. Got a nice orange, get all the orange juice out of it. And boy, there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, and the show is really only possible with your support. I don't take any advertisement money, no advertisements at all, and so there's nothing coming in that way. And that means I can be honest with you about stuff like Rosetta Stone, for example. I've used Rosetta Stone in the past, and it has limited use, but probably not worth your money if you really want to learn Spanish. Just my opinion. But I am a Spanish professor, and I have been a Spanish professor for a long time, and I'll just tell you the truth, that's probably not worth your money. What is worth your money is continuing to support this show, and I want to thank everyone who has donated in the past and those who continue to support us on those weekly donations. I see you there, weekly donations. Thank you so much for your continued support. People who are donating $50 and above, I will read your name and amount on the show, and anything under that I will keep anonymous for reasons of anonymity. And if you've got a question for me, or if you've got any topics you'd like me to write about, like to learn more about, especially on those bonus culture episodes, send me an email, andrew@readtospeak.com. Andrew@readtospeak, all one word, .com. Eso. You can make a donation at listenreadinteract.com/donate. listenreadinteract.com/donate. There's a donations page there. There's also some buttons that show up occasionally in the show notes page. And all of your support, it means the world to me. There's a way to donate with Stripe. There's a way to donate with PayPal. There's a way to donate with a service called Buy Me a Coffee, which I found interesting. That's a new one that I put on there recently, and so that's interesting. Any way you can support is so good, and it really does help out, and it makes us want to keep putting out content. So thank you so much for everyone who has donated again. Thank you again. Muchas gracias, muchas gracias, muchas gracias. listenreadinteract.com/donate. Lectura completa. A eso del mediodía del miércoles, Eduardo y Estrella van a un café-restaurante que promociona su lasaña y su café. El lugar se llama Ex Fidanzato, café y restaurante italiano. Los cónyuges entran al café-restaurante y se sientan a una mesa. Un mesero viene a la mesa. Es un hombre alto. Tiene la cabeza rasurada y mucha barba. Estrella no puede ponerle la cara, pero piensa que lo reconoce. Entonces el mesero les dice: «Hola, muy buen día». Al escuchar al mesero hablar, Estrella está segura de que conoce a este hombre, pero no sabe de dónde. «Buen día, señor», dice Estrella. Le molesta que no puede ponerle la cara al mesero. «Usted me parece muy familiar. ¿Lo conozco?» «No, señorita, no lo creo», dice el mesero. «¿Desea algo de tomar?» «Le encargo un cafecito, por favor», dice Estrella. «A la orden, señorita», dice el mesero. «¿Y para el señor?» «Yo solo quisiera una lasaña entera, por favor», dice Eduardo. «Estoy entrenando para un concurso de comer». «Muy bien, señor», dice el mesero. Con esto, el mesero se va. Estrella le dice a su esposo: «Yo juro que conozco a nuestro mesero, pero no puedo ponerle la cara». Bueno, there's a little bit of a cliffhanger there, I suppose. We don't know who the waiter is, but we know that Estrella thinks she knows that she might know him from somewhere. We're not going to be finding out until next week. New episodes of the Listen, Read, Interact podcast come out every Saturday, so check your podcast players for those updates. And that's the deal, yo. That is the deal. I love teaching Spanish in this way, and if you want to learn Spanish in this way, you can check out the Tacoma Language Academy. Go to tacomalanguageacademy.com, and I have classes that I offer where they're small classes, limited to a certain number of people, depending on the class that it is, and they are designed specifically for beginners, and there are some classes also that are designed for intermediate speakers as well. And so we have beginner classes, intermediate classes, and they're very heavily story-based. And so if you want to create some personalized stories, some of these stories, like the ones you hear on the show that came from real classrooms, if you want to hear some of those stories, and not only hear them, but make one up as a class, and so it has this personalized meaning for you, man, that's a really good way to pick up a lot of language really, really fast. You can apply for admission at tacomalanguageacademy.com. It's a free application, and all you got to do is fill out a one-pager. It's not very long, and that's really just to make sure we're a good fit for each other. If you're not sure which class would fit for you, take the placement quiz. That's for free, and you can take a free placement quiz, and it will recommend what classes to sign up for. And some private lessons might also be available. Right now, they're a bit on pause, but private lessons will start back up here as we move on into spring and then on into summer as well. So there'll be some private lesson slots available. There are going to be some classes coming up, including the Spanish Story Lab, which is for true beginners, the Spanish Chat Club, which is for intermediate learners. It's a conversation-based class. And there's also the Spanish Language Accelerator, which will be beginning in, when will that start? I think it's going to start towards the end of June, maybe early July. It's not, the schedule's not out for that quite yet, but it is coming up soon, so check it out. tacomalanguageacademy.com. tacomalanguageacademy.com. There's a link to it in the show notes page as well, so you can just click on that as well. But tacomalanguageacademy.com. Hey, thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias y hasta la próxima.